Wherever you're listening in the world, it's a pleasure to welcome you to IsraelCast, the podcast powered by Jewish National Fund USA, your voice in Israel. I'm Steven Shalowitz, first reminding you that for over 120 years, Jewish National Fund USA has been the premier philanthropic movement for the land and people of Israel. While best known for planting trees in Israel, JNF USA contributes to Israeli life in so many ways, including community development in the Negev and the Galilee, preservation of heritage sites, supporting people with disabilities, and connecting high school and college students to Israel. To learn more and to see how you can contribute, do visit jnf.org. Once again, jnf.org. Well, here on IsraelCast, we love featuring up truly unique personal stories that make up the diverse fabric of Israeli society. And one such story is that of Jonathan Elkhoury. Now, Jonathan is a gay Christian Lebanese refugee who now lives in Israel. For their own protection, he and his family were forced to leave Lebanon for Israel after the Lebanese Civil War because his father was a member of the SLA, the South Lebanon Army, which was supported by the Israel Defense Forces. His father left in 2000, and Jonathan and his mother and his brother fled the following year. Jonathan not only has a remarkable life story, but is doing so much today to foster ties among various communities, both in and outside of Israel, especially in the wake of Hamas's barbaric attacks on October 7th. We'll be unpacking all things Jonathan in our conversation with him, which begins right now, as Jonathan Elkhoury joins us now on the line via Zoom from Tel Aviv. Jonathan, it is truly an honor to have you on IsraelCast. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you and JNF for hosting me. And I think this is one of the great things to be able to share stories from the ground from Israel about the diversity that we have here.
Right. And that's why we wanted to have you aboard. And before we started rolling, I just want to share with our dear listeners around the world, I had told Jonathan, you're a celebrity, you're a rock star, because I was at a Shabbat dinner last Friday night and I was mentioning to someone that Jonathan was coming on the program. And I just happened to mention his name. And of course, her eyes lit up and she knew everything about Jonathan. So you have, I know at least one fan out there, Jonathan, but I know that you have a whole legion of fans actually out there, okay, through your social media handles. And before we get started, I want you to give a shout out to your social media handles so that people can follow you. And we'll, of course, have a link to that on all of our posts about you. But why don't you go ahead and do the honors?
Yeah, well, on the social media X, that known as also as former Twitter, my handle over there is Jonathan underline ELK, and on my rest of my social media, both on Instagram or TikTok, it's JON underline ELK. This is as simple as that.
All right. And we'll be tagging Jonathan on everything as we promote this episode. So certainly for folks that didn't write that down, you can obviously find him there. Okay. I want to talk about October 7th, the aftermath, and what you have been doing in that space, really, again, to foster ties and to educate people. But I think it's really important that we share with our listeners a little bit about your background because you have the most unique, fascinating background. And I just want to start with you, Jonathan, is a little boy growing up in Lebanon. What was life like for you there? And talk about your father's role with the SLA.
He was growing up in south of Lebanon during the 90s was still a difficult thing because war was still going on. Hezbollah was still under, constant uh, um, fighting against the IDF and against the South Lebanon Army that my father was part of. And basically, when you look at it, and if I want to try and make, because one of the first things that my mom told one of her friends after October 7th happened, after the attack, the barbaric and horrific attack by Hamas on Israeli soil, was, oh my God, this is the same thing that the Palestinian Liberation Organization, terrorist organization in Lebanon, did to us during the 70s and during the 80s. So that was kind of something that maybe could explain what happened also in south of Lebanon, where you had, and the reason for the creation of the South Lebanon Army was to fight against these terrorist organizations that created Fatah land in the land of south of Lebanon, and they started persecuting the Christians and Druze and even Shia Muslims in south of Lebanon. So that was basically the reason for the creation of the South Lebanon Army was to be able to have some sort of a connection of, minorities protecting each other in the Middle East. Because both us, the Christians in south of Lebanon, and both Israel are minorities in the Middle East because of the Jewish people, and it's being persecuted all over the Middle East. So that was something that kind of connected these two communities together. And the reason that they fought alongside each other, my dad fought shoulder to shoulder with the IDF soldiers from 1982 till May 2000 because he believed that at the end of the day, we need to have peace with Israel. And because he believed that this is the only way that we were able to live is to protect each other. And that's kind of what led the way. And growing up in the 90s, it was really similar to that because I knew that the IDF that was next to me in my village, was my like childhood scenery. That's what I remember, seeing the IDF. Also, like every now and then we had to go to shelter because they were firing at us, not the IDF, but Hezbollah. So it will be some sort of a way that we know that the IDF is there to protect us. We know that the IDF is there because they're allies. And that was kind of, growing up knowing that this is our allies.
Yeah, and I want to underscore that point because I think a lot of people think of the IDF as having just gone into Lebanon and not having had allies there. But that's an important point to underscore that the SLA allied itself with the IDF to rid South Lebanon of these terrorist organizations like Hezbollah, for example.
Yeah, exactly. And before even Hezbollah started in 1982, there was the PLO, that was the Palestinian terror organization that controlled south of Lebanon, created Fatahland. So when Israel entered Lebanon, even at the end of the 70s, not like in 1982 when they created what's called the security belt in south of Lebanon, they entered not only with assistance and open arms by the Shia Muslim community in south of Lebanon, and the Christian community and the Druze community, but also the Lebanese government, because the Lebanese government knew that she's not capable of actually handling that terrorist organization. So the creation of South of Lebanon Army was an agreement between the government of Lebanon to have this organization that is going to be a military organization that will assist the IDF on making sure that these terrorist organization wouldn't exist anymore in south of Lebanon. So it wasn't just, Israel kind of entered because the locals welcomed that. It was because the government of Lebanon agreed on that as well.
I want you to connect the dots, Jonathan, because you invoked Fatah land. And I want you to connect the dots, what Fatah is for our listeners that might not be familiar with it. And I'll spoiler alert because I'll say that they're the ones that are running Judea and Samaria, aka the West Bank.
Yeah, so basically what happened is that Yasser Arafat, after he was kicked from Jordan in Black September in 1970, they came to south of Lebanon and part of the organization PLO and created Fatah. That was basically the basis of the terrorist organization that worked in south of Lebanon and persecuted Christians and persecuted Shia Muslims. It was Yasser Arafat and his organization. So that was the PLO and Fatahland that they created in south of Lebanon.
And share with our listeners also your religious background.
Okay. So I come out from a small village of Christians in south of Lebanon. You can say I'm a mix of two contradictions. Since I grew up, I had contradictions in me, and I am half Catholic, half Greek Orthodox, or as my father says, we are Christians and your mom is Catholic, and this is something that I grew up on, since day one. But this is kind of it showed me from little age that it's possible to live with like different types of identities. And it kind of led the way to who I am today, both Christian, Muslim, both Christian, part of the LGBTQ plus community, both from the South Lebanon Army community, Israeli, Lebanese. So all of these identities that in other platforms they would like, okay, dude, choose your struggle. But this is kind of what makes it even like more more beautiful, in my opinion, because
Yeah,
it gives
because
me a different type of way to look at things.
exactly. And none of us are just one dimensional. We're all multidimensional. And let's face it, that means as a kid, you got to celebrate two sets of Christmases. So that means two sets of gifts. So not
Exactly.
too bad there. You got to cash in on
And
that one.
and
All right.
also Easter. That would
That's
be
right.
amazing.
Right. And all the delicacies on both sides of the aisle there. All right. So let's fast forward with your story and talk about 2000 and talk about your dad having to leave the south of Lebanon.
So Israel decided to withdraw from south of Lebanon in May 2000, 23rd of May 2000. And that was somewhat of an one-sided decision by Israel because, it's like, okay, it's enough. We're not going to be able to get to any agreement, not from the Lebanese side or not from the Syrian side, to make sure that this terror organization that is in control right now in Lebanon, Hezbollah, and today is led by Hassan Nasrallah. So Israel decided to withdraw completely, and at the end of the day, they gave opportunity for the South Lebanon Army families to get shelter in Israel because there was an immediate danger towards the soldiers and some of their families. Because Hassan Nasrallah, only 3 days before the withdrawal, made a speech and said that the South Lebanon Army communities and their help have three options. One option is to flee with the enemy to their country, that means to Israel. The second option was to surrender to the Lebanese authorities. And we know that everyone who surrendered to the Lebanese authorities was basically at the same moment moved to a Hezbollah facility and was tortured in prison. Some of them didn't survive. Some of them are still in prison till today. Some of them were able to pay tons of money to be able to kind of sweeten their sentence or to lower the torture that they have to go through. And others, he said, the rest of them, this is the third option that he gave us. So, he's such a kind person. The third option that he gave us was to be butchered while hugging their own mother. And that's kind of something that made this, the day of the withdrawal, it made a huge chaos in south of Lebanon because suddenly people felt that this is an immediate threat on them. So 8,000 people crossed the border that day with Israel, that eventually opened the border and gave everyone who wanted to just go in to find shelter in Israel. We are now today about 3,500 people. It's approximately 680 families. A lot of them returned back to Lebanon and suffered consequences out of it. Some of them are still in prison today, and some of them are in other places in Europe. But those who decided to stay in Israel, we are full Israeli citizens. We are really integrated to the Israeli society. 95% of us from the second generation goes into national service or military service. We're involved in every aspect of life, both in hiding, both in the uh, um, like I mentioned, in national service, military service, in other divisions in the Israeli, the police department, and so we're in every aspect of life.
Yeah, and we're going to get to that in just a moment. But you and your brother and your mother actually stayed in South Lebanon until you were able to meet your father in Israel. And
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you can just real briefly talk about that time period and what life was like living under Hezbollah rule in South Lebanon after the SLA was disbanded and after the IDF left.
So my mom, being a strong, independent woman, she decided that she doesn't want to leave Lebanon because at the beginning they didn't really know what's going to happen with the South Lebanon Army community, especially those who fled to Israel. They thought that, Israel will find some sort of a way to get to an agreement with the Lebanese government and they will be able to return back to Lebanon. That was like one of the things that they talk about. But suddenly, like life changed in 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 a question of seconds in south of Lebanon when Israel left and Hezbollah entered, like a minute after. They made this huge walk throughout our villages for us to make sure that, we understand that they are now in control. They made sure even to, while they're marching, they're celebrating their march of them occupying South Lebanon. They entered our homes and they took whatever they want. Later on, they went back and went from home to home to make sure that they know, you know, and can take whatever they want. They took our cars, they took jewelry, they took everything. And they continued also, like, life changed because at that time we didn't use to lock our doors. We really lived in a peaceful way. We knew that everyone was okay, that there was no theft in our area, that everything was fine. If someone wants to come visit, he will just jump over and come visit. But suddenly we stopped, even at night, to kind of move around from places to places because they would do a lot of, circling around our houses and our villages, the Hezbollah people. And the atmosphere changed. Suddenly, half of the kids in my classroom weren't there anymore because they fled south of Lebanon because they don't want to live under Hezbollah control. So some of them moved to a different side of Lebanon, or some of them fled to Israel. And this is kind of something that, you could have, you felt it from the first second. And then my mom decided, of this threat kind of coming closer and closer, that we're not able to continue living our lives in south of Lebanon. And she wanted us to grow up with a dad. She didn't want, kind of to miss the family that she created. So she decided that we should leave Lebanon, and we fled on the 27th of August of 2001. We were able to go to Beirut airport and to flee to Cyprus, and from Cyprus, we were able to go into Israel with our Lebanese passports.
And you didn't know you were going into Israel, did you?
Oh, not at all. As you see, I speak a lot. So my mom made sure that I
Even
don't
then, right?
really, yes, you could have tell since a young age where this is going.
Yeah.
Uh, so, so my mom didn't really share with me where we're going. I was 9 years old already,
And your brother, how
and
old at the time?
he was 12. My brother is 4 years older than me, and he knew more than I did because my mom really used his translation skills through Cyprus and through other places to help her out. But I didn't really know. She always changed the story. She's like, "Oh yeah, we're going to visit some family in Beirut." And I'm like, "Yay! I always wanted to go visit those family." And then suddenly we arrived to Beirut, but it wasn't the family; it was the airport. I'm like, "Okay, we're going on a trip." And then my mom was like, "Yeah, we're going to visit some relatives we have in the US." Now I know this is not a lie. We have relatives in the US, but we like landed half an hour later and it wasn't the US. So, okay, what's going on here? And then my mom kind of, again, kind of changed it. We're going, yeah, we're there just, pausing here for a bit, but our next flight, we're gonna meet the relatives. Um, so only I think when we took off from Cyprus, after my mom made sure the thing is that at Cyprus, the flight to Lebanon or the flight to Israel are one gate next to each other at Larnaca Airport. That was, the case back then. And it was 5 minutes apart from each other. So we waited at the lounge of like the area of like the food court till the last second because my mom didn't want anyone from the flight going to Lebanon to see us going to the flight that goes to Israel, because there were some people that flew with us to Cyprus that are now coming back to Lebanon. So she was terrified. I could feel on her eyes the fear that it's going on. And then, like last second, we just ran to the gate to make sure. And suddenly, my mom noticed that the number of the flight on her ticket and the number of the flight on the screen were in the same. So she whispered to the flight attendant over there, like on the ground, before we went up, like, is this the flight to Tel Aviv to Israel? And the flight attendant, oh yes, we changed the flight. This is the same thing. You can just go on. And my mom kept on asking every stop of the way till we got on the stairs of the plane. We were already like at the entrance of the plane, and my mom is still asking the flight attendant on board, "Is this the flight to Israel?" And she's whispering it to her, and she's saying, "Yes, you wouldn't be able to get to this point if it wasn't the right flight." And I think only when we took off, I saw that my mom is now able to breathe. She fled with two kids. Like, what if something happens? Um, and only then she told me that I'm gonna go meet my dad in like half an hour.
First of all, I have to say, I've got to meet your mom the next time I'm in Israel.
Oh yeah, you definitely have
Okay,
to.
because she is a Wonder Woman. Okay, she is a real superstar there. To hold this all together, especially
Yeah,
with two small kids and the
yeah, for a year
responsibility
and a half.
for a year and a half, and then to take the kids on this journey. So you meet your father, you land in Israel, you've heard about Israel, and what's going through your head? Did you take anything special with you on the journey from your life in Lebanon?
Well, uh, I will begin with my mom when she told me that we're going to Beirut for a while. She asked me to take something important to me, and I was a child that really adored like bears and like stuffed bears and stuff like that. So I decided to take two teddy bears that I was like the most attached to. They were like twinsies. I took them beneath my arms. I like just hugged them throughout the whole way from our home to the airport, from the airport to Cyprus, from Cyprus to Israel. I was hugging them the whole time. They were like my small babies, taking them with me. And
Do you still have them?
I still have one of them, yes. The other one kind of lost its head throughout the way. Uh, because they had turning heads and turning like things. I would play with them a lot. So one of them just like
Yeah.
uh
But what a
and
memento to have of your journey in your previous life. So you land in Tel Aviv, and
yeah.
there's your father.
Yeah, so at the beginning I didn't really recognize my father because like a year and a half almost have passed. And my dad kind of gained weight, and also he used to have a mustache that he suddenly took off. And like his face was different. He was like literally standing in front of me. And my mom was yelling, "Here's your dad, here's your dad." I was like, "Where? Where?" I was like looking around, but he was there like in front of me, and I wasn't able to recognize him at the beginning. But that was like super emotional because like finally we were able kind of to hug him. For a year and 3 months, I didn't know where my father is. No one told me, no one shared it with me, and they weren't able to share it with me because my dad is in an enemy state. And I can't just, go along and say, yeah, my dad is in Israel. No, you can't say that.
Well,
I
what
don't know
did
what will
anyone tell you
happen.
when you asked your mom, "Hey, where's dad?" What did she say?
They told me that dad is in a safe place, that, he had to go to a safe place, and that's it. I remember, one time we were able kind of to connect because my dad left my mom a phone when he left. And it was an Israeli phone with an Israeli number. It used to be like the old like Nokia phones with the antenna, like, really
Like a
clumsy,
brick,
big.
we used to call them.
Exactly. It is a brick. It's like the battery that you take off is like the size of the iPhone that you have today. This is how huge that was. Only the battery. And he left her that phone that one time. She used to hide it in our backyard. She would wait till the patrol that the Hezbollah would have on in our village go. She would go to the backyard, dig out the phone that she like wrapped with a million of bags and and um and metals and stuff like that. She would connect back the phone, turn it on, call my dad, talk to him for a few minutes to make sure that everything is okay and to plan our escape out of Lebanon. And one time she called me and my brother into her room to speak with our dad, but that was like the only connection that we had with him, that I know that he's fine because he like, responded back on the phone. But other than that, I didn't really see him. I didn't really know where he was. I didn't really know what was going on. So it was like completely of something that they actually weren't able to share because of actual threat that was on us.
I just got to say, I think someone needs to make a movie about all this. This is like an
I
Argo kind of experience, isn't it? So Jonathan, so you arrive in Israel and talk about settling in and what life was like for you and the family, to interact with Israelis, to have to learn Hebrew, and so on.
Yeah, so immediately when we came to Israel, we kind of because we came a year, almost a year and a half after everyone, it was kind of, everything was already settled. My dad immediately took us to a place where the Israeli government has settled some of the South Lebanon Army community families. It was in Nahariya. It was in this like beautiful resort with like cabin houses by the beach. It was amazing, fantastic. Um, but it was like I didn't know the culture, I didn't know the language. I was like, I didn't know any word of Hebrew. I knew of like Israel, but not really because our parents tried as much as possible to give us our youth in a way and not involve us in all of what's going on in the war in politics. But we knew that Israel is in our side, is the good side. Like we didn't grow up even at school. I don't think that they ever spoke to us about Israel in school, or like in a negative way. I've never felt that because every person in south of Lebanon knew that Israel is on our side and Israel is our ally. Israel is the only reason that we're safe, and the only reason that we were able to kind of fight against terror. Um, so it was kind of, suddenly coming to this place where there's a special school for the South Lebanon Army community. There's an ulpan for our parents, so they could learn Hebrew, and also like places that they could go and start entering the work field because at to that point, the majority of them were military personnel for 18 years. So the majority of them didn't even finish middle school or not saying high school. My dad didn't finish third grade because of the war, the civil war, and everything what happened. So that was kind of something that they are all kind of working in hard day jobs in factories, bus drivers, and stuff like that. And it was kind of you know funny in a way because I didn't really go through the whole experience that the other kids went through. Because immediately when we came, my mom kind of, it's like, okay, we need to kind of move on. It's like there was an issue that the Israeli government said that now the South Lebanon Army community families kind of, start settling in. And if you want, you can go and, find a home to rent in other places. Like you don't have to stay in these communities. We're going to start to kind of integrate you more to the Israeli society. So my dad chose to go to Haifa because Haifa is a major city that has a mixed society of both Arabs and Jews and Muslims and Christians, and of course the Jewish community there. And the reason for that is also because in Haifa there's much more opportunities, much more places where someone who doesn't really speak Hebrew can get along with, and find some jobs that we were able to kind of handle. And we were put in Jewish schools, Jewish public schools. That was the schools that accepted us because, on the other hand, the Arab population in Israel at the beginning treated us as traitors. They said because we collaborated with Israel, they're not gonna accept us to their community. So even not in
Even though
churches,
they're Israeli.
yes, yes, even though they're Israeli citizens, even Israeli members of parliament that are Arab community members went against us. And I remember one of them. His name is Ahmed Tibi. He's still a member of parliament till today. And Ahmed Tibi said that the kids of the South Lebanon Army community needs to pay the price of what their parents did, what our parents did basically to protect our community. That's what our parents did.
Can you drill down on that whole concept? Because that's really foreign for many people. In other words, you were working with Israel to have some semblance of peace in your community. And clearly, the enemy at that time was Hezbollah. Before that, it was Fatah and Yasser Arafat's group. And so these individuals that were saying that, the member of Knesset, for example, they're all Israeli citizens. For
Oh
me,
yeah, they are
that's a
100.
huge, that's a huge disconnect.
Yeah, and here's the point where a lot of Israeli Arabs at that point didn't really feel connected to Israel at any point. And it came from a place where not only that they didn't feel connected to Israel, but the Israeli Arab members of parliament, that these are the people who were supposed to push the Arabic community forward. They were supposed to push the Arabic community towards the Jewish community for us to be able to work together for a better future. They were the one that's standing in the front line of kind of this disconnection that they wanted to create between the Arabs and Jews here in Israel. But for example, since October 7th, you can't imagine the amount of Arab initiatives that started to assist and help Israeli communities that fled from the south of Israel because of Hamas's attack. Amazing, amazing initiatives of food and supplies for their children and also for them with clothes and everything they needed. Bicycles for the kids that a person from the north of Israel have given to a lot of kids from the south, and also other places. And most importantly, also people who went online and went on TV and international TV and also in Arabic and said, Israel is our country. We're going to defend it. We're going to be part of it because Hamas's attack on south of Israel wasn't only against the Jewish community, because Hamas also targeted Muslims. That they knew that they're Muslims because some of them had hijab on them. Some of them even they were forced to say phrases from the Quran because they wanted them to prove that they're Muslims. And although they said the phrases from the Quran, they shot them. There is video proof of that Hamas themselves took. And this is something that I think today we are in a different place where we were back then at the beginning of the 2000s. And you can see a rise of the Israeli identity inside of the Arabic community in Israel that since October 7th, a lot of Arab Israelis have kind of put a priority to their Israeli identity because they are now feeling more connected because we were all targeted and we were all kind of in this together and we were all in the same shock of we couldn't believe that something like that could happen. Um,
Yeah, that's what I wanted you to address because the tide has turned from that period of time from the early 2000s. And so
mhm.
I think it's like 70 some percent of the Arab community in Israel condemn the Hamas attacks, as we've pointed out here on the program. So that really needs to be underscored in the amount of work that's happening in the Arab community to foster and to support the state of Israel. And we are going to talk about post October 7th, I promise, to you and our dear listeners in just a sec. But let's just sort of wind down your trajectory and your story. So you attend a Jewish school, you learn Hebrew, you are interacting with other Jewish kids, and you are beginning to build your life. Your parents begin to work. Share with us what their professions are. Talk a little bit about what your brother's doing, and then how you got to be where you are today.
Wow, how many hours do we have?
Well, let's
Um,
see. I'm going to sleep at 10 o'clock tonight, and it's 1:19 as we record this. So you do the math.
um,
As you can tell, I
so
want to get to October 7th and post October 7th, but
yeah.
so in the broadest of brushstrokes, really. So first let's do this. Let me break that apart. What are your parents doing right now?
So my dad is a bus driver at Egged, the national bus company that we
In
have here in
Haifa.
Israel. Yeah, he works in Haifa, but he works all across. Sometimes he do travels to Eilat. Some of them he do travels to Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and all. He's been everywhere. Like it's not one line that he has.
Right.
He's like
And your
all
mom?
over. And my mom works with elderly. She helps them. Yeah,
Eh,
this is like a governmental assistant organization that helps elderly that needs assistance. In like house chores and stuff like that.
And they both learned Hebrew.
Yes, yeah. My dad already knew Hebrew because of his military service, and my mom, she learned Hebrew kind of on the go. When we first came here, the first job that she had for, I could say, 18, almost 20 years since we came here, she worked in a place with only Arab speakers. It was a place that was, helping kids that were unable to kind of communicate and connect. They were like really struggling kids. And she used to be a nurse in Lebanon. And so she kind of comes with the background of, helping and assisting. So she did that for 20 years. But because she was in a place with only Arab speakers, she wasn't really able to kind of, you know, get the Hebrew thing.
Right.
So what we did is for 1 year, we did it in the house. We said we're gonna switch. Our whole conversations in the house are gonna be Hebrew till mom gets to speak Hebrew good. And we did that because we would used to go a lot, in some point as a second generation for like immigrants or people who fled from war zones, um, it comes to the kids to kind of help,
Yeah.
their parents.
Listen,
Uh,
Jonathan, it's not only in Israel, it's all over the world, even in the
exactly.
United
That's why,
States. When
yeah,
immigrants came or come to the United States, that's what ends up happening. The kids are the ones
yeah,
that are the catalysts for everything, or they're the translators. So it's not only in
exactly. That's why
Israel.
I did the generalization of
Yeah,
saying that every immigrant knows it.
right. And
So
then
kind of
talk about,
we
and then
had to
talk
help
about,
it. Yeah.
right, talk about your brother just real briefly. And he's doing what?
And my brother is in high tech. He's the successful kid, as
Great.
you can say.
And he's married. He's married, right?
Yeah, he's married. Yeah.
Okay. Everyone's in Lebanon except your mother, your father, your brother, and your sister-in-law. And so you've created a family of the other former SLA members, right? In other words, they're really your aunties and your uncles and your cousins.
Yeah, exactly. So, for example, we're like minutes from Christmas. And at the beginning, the first year, we celebrated by ourselves, only the four of us. And that's kind of something that, it's a huge difference from being close to our family and like celebrating all together with like our grandparents and everything, and suddenly to be only the small of us. But we started step by step to create our own family from the South Lebanon Army community. So we connected with other families, and other families kind of came along till we like had this huge festive dinner table that we would be able to kind of be all together.
And do you have any connection, any communication with your relatives still in Lebanon? And if so, how does that work?
Well, we're trying because there is no fear on us here in Israel, but it's kind of comes to in a way that, we're in no contact whatsoever with our family in Lebanon. Because, we're in Israel, it's an enemy state. So in some way you could say they kind of disowned us. And there's no connection, but we always try to make sure that everything is all right through some relatives that are living abroad, and to be able, to understand that their situation is fine, but other than that, there's no connection with them.
Are your grandparents still living?
From my mother's side, yes.
And you've had no connection, or she's had no communication with them since you've left?
No, we're not able to do that. Both my grandparents from my father's side died when we were already here in Israel. My grandfather died only like 2 years after we came here. That was really difficult. I was the favorite on that grandfather, and
We can all
it
see
was
why.
yeah. He was always keeping my back. So when my cousins would beat me, he would go and chase them throughout the village and make sure no one touches me. Um, and later on, my grandmother also died around 2009 from my father's side. But this is kind of what
Yeah, I can't
you kind
imagine
of
how
learn to
difficult
deal
that,
with.
yeah, I can't imagine how difficult that must be because, again, you came from such a close family and those
Yeah.
villages are such close-knit groups.
Yeah,
So,
like house to next to each other. This is like
right.
literally our houses were connected, ours and our grandparents.
Right. So let's just talk a little bit about Jonathan real briefly before we get to really the horrific events of October 7th and what you've been doing post October 7th. So you go to school and talk about your journey through school and into adulthood and your connection to the IDF. And if you can just share a little bit about that before we move on.
Yeah, so you can stay in somewhat that my experience as a kid growing up in Israel was really good because once I came to school, even in fourth grade, I had the people in my classroom welcome me so well that they all wanted to know who's this cool kid who came in the middle of the year and kind of comes from Lebanon, doesn't speak Hebrew. What's going on here? They were like always around me, always trying to figure out what's going on. And later on, in middle school and high school, I was put in a school where we had the majority of the South Lebanon Army kids in Haifa. So the school kind of would give us, extra hours after school to help us finish our diplomas in the highest scores possible, and also take us on some tours throughout Israel to kind of let us explore our new environment. They would help us in almost everything possible. But moreover, they made sure that we understand that we are part of the Israeli society. Because on the National Memorial Day for the IDF, the school would give us the opportunity to read a prayer for the South Lebanon Army fallen soldiers. And that was something that they would, every year, they would do it. I would do it also when I was there for middle school and high school for the 6 years. I would do it. And it would be right after the prayer for the fallen soldiers of the IDF. It wasn't like in the end of the ceremony or like something kind of disconnected. No, no, no. It was the heart of it. There was something that gave us the understanding that, okay, we are in a place that recognizes us, that understands that we have shared history, and that kind of wants us also to feel part of what's going on and not stay aside and kind of be disconnected. And that was something that gave us all the feeling of, okay, we found a home. This is now our home. This is now our beginning of our new story. And that's how kind of everything continued. In the age of 17, I received a draft to the IDF because all of the people here in 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 the South Lebanon Army community receives a draft to the IDF to distinguish it from the Arabic community here. For example, the Christian community or the Muslim community or the Bedouin community, they don't receive a draft to the IDF because if they want to, they can volunteer. It's
Mhm.
not mandatory. Not like for the Jewish community and then not like the male from the Druze community. But for us also, because they knew that we're going to follow our father's footsteps. They knew that we're going to go and be part of this society, not only part of it, but we're going to be a vibrant part, a part that really takes action, that really helps our community, that really gets involved. And this is kind of what led my way, learning it from my father that I need to be an essential part of society, that I can't just sit aside and complain all day that, oh, I didn't get that right. We fled our country and now we're supposed to be, these sad people. No, we're going to remember it, but we're not going to live it. And we're going to be uh, um, part of Israel's citizens because this is now our home. We can just sit aside and not do anything. And this is kind of what got me involved in a lot of public activity in Israel.
Right. And so
Um,
talk about what you did in the Army and also, the number of years you served, and then also what you did post Army, especially vis-a-vis the Army.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, I decided not to do a military service. I did national service instead.
Yeah.
It's kind of equivalent to it. It's just not on uniform. I did it for 2 years in a Ramadan Facility Hospital. I was like an administrative for the personnel clinic, was for the staffers of the hospital, and in charge of the 75 volunteers of the South Lebanon Army that were part of Ramadan Facility Hospital. And at the end of the day, when you do national service and military service, when you go out, you will get the same, amount of of help and assistance as any other who did the military service. So it's kind of basically the same thing.
Yeah.
Um, and right after I finished my national service, I started volunteering as a spokesman for an organization called the Christian Empowerment Council. And basically, that was the Israeli Christian recruitment form that they encourage Christians in Israel to join the military and national service as part of, connecting the Christian society after so many years to the state of Israel. And suddenly we had this peak of people enlisting to the military from 35 a year to 150 a year. That's a huge number. And the Christian community, it's about 2% of the Israeli population. It's about 300,000 people. That's it. There's not a lot of people. But we got to a point where almost a third of whoever finishes high school from the Christian community every year goes to national service, military service, or any other security related jobs. That was something amazing that we suddenly kind of, saw that the integration process is starting to work. And a lot of people asked why the IDF? Because, today I believe that both the IDF and national service kind of became the melting pot of the Israeli society. Because there you meet everyone
Hmm.
from all backgrounds, from all social, and types of communities and religions, and this is the place where you can all be at the same level. No one is above anyone. You're all serving the same amount of time. You're all serving alongside of each other, shoulder to shoulder. And that's something that kind of connects you to other people. You'll be able to learn their culture, and they will be able to learn your culture as well. So that was something really meaningful. And, it was beautiful to see it. And today also there's Christians and Bedouins and Muslims fighting with the IDF in south of Israel, in Gaza, and also making sure that our borders in the north are protected from Hezbollah.
Right. And that's where I want to go right now. I mean, Jonathan, let me just say this is the first of, I think, many conversations we're going to have with you, because certainly there's no shortage of topics to cover when Jonathan Elkhoury is in the house. So let's pivot then really to October 7th. Briefly, where were you on October 7th? How did you hear the news? And what was the first thing that you did after hearing the news?
Well, it started here around 6:30 a.m. and I was still in bed. It was a Saturday morning. And I kind of woke up because my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. I'm like, what's going on? And I was in Haifa, in my parents' house, and we didn't have sirens there.
Mhm.
But suddenly, like, I woke up and I'm like, okay, I see like siren alerts. I'm like, okay, it's another round. Like, we're
Mhm.
used to it. It's gonna stop any second. And I just went back to sleep. And then I woke up around 8:39 and I'm like, okay, no, this is like severe because we're still getting rocket alarms. And I start to see, like, I went on Twitter and suddenly I saw these videos of like these tenders, like white Toyota tenders with terrorists on them with their rifles. I'm like, wait a minute, is it like a real thing or is someone like messing up with us? Like, is there's like someone is now making like fun of the situation? Because Israelis Jewish humor is the best humor ever. Even in the darkest times, even while it was happening, we were making some jokes online because we didn't really know what's going on. We weren't able to kind of cope with how big the scale is. Till later on that day, where we understood that okay, this is something unusual. This is something that never happened because suddenly people would go on TV and kind of ask and say that they're hiding in their shelter and there are terrorists outside of their door, that they're trying to hold the doors and, asking to send help, asking, for the IDF to come and help them out. And I think at that moment, when I first heard, I think it was 11 a.m., when I first heard the phone conversation with a young, Israeli, I think she was 21, she was whispering on the phone to the news anchor, telling him I saw my dad being kidnapped to the Gaza Strip. I seen a photo of him on Telegram being dragged in his underwear and undershirt by the terrorists. I think that moment, the click started to hit in our minds. And I think it was me, my dad, and my mom. We just sat there in our salon, like in the living room, and we were staring at the TV. In the meantime, there's siren alerts. In the meantime, Lebanon started to kind of get heated also because Hezbollah decided to join in. And we were like, what's happening? What's going on? This is something unfamiliar, something that we have never experienced, something that we never expected could ever happen. That suddenly the IDF declared that some Israeli villages are 100% under Hamas control. It's like, wait, what? What's going on? Um, and it was like a mixed feeling of both fear and confusion and trying to kind of realize what's going on.
And I would imagine for your family, because you lived during Hezbollah times in South Lebanon, it had a different resonance than others in Israel.
Yeah, I think it kind of got to me a few days after October 7th. It was already like the following Friday. My mom was speaking to her friend on the phone, and she was like, you know, what happened the other day, like what happened last Saturday, was the same thing that happened to us in south of Lebanon when we had to flee, when we were hiding in our homes, when they butchered us, the Palestinian terrorists even crucified people in villages in south of Lebanon. That's how extreme they went.
Mm.
And and there was something that kind of hit me that we are also carrying that gene of DNA that called surviving. This is something that is part of us. And suddenly, immediately, when it kicks in, it kind of makes you want to do something in order to protect yourself.
Jonathan, just as an aside, are there people in South Lebanon today that are opposed to Hezbollah and that want all of these terrorist groups out? Or I don't know any other way of asking, but or are they welcoming them? I mean, can you just really briefly talk about that? And then I want to talk about the outreach that you've been doing.
Yeah, so I know that there's a lot of Lebanese. I know because I speak with a lot of Lebanese. I've done some few spaces on Twitter with actually Lebanese from the other side, literally from the other side of the border, with some Israelis here and also Lebanese from Lebanon. And we wanted to kind of connect and start talking. And we're doing it in our names. We're doing it live. You know, the Lebanese side is less visible with their name and
Are they more
faces.
discreet about it?
Exactly, but they do go up and speak and talk and share their experience that they are anti-Hamas, that they remember what happened to south of Lebanon because of the Hamas terrorists. They all remember that. So the majority of the Lebanese people are against what Hamas did, are against even what Hezbollah is doing, because they know that Hezbollah's interest is not Lebanon's interest, it's Iran's interest. And that Hezbollah is basically, by definition, uh, um, um, you can say an Iranian occupation that is settling down in the heart of Lebanon and in the heart of the political spectrum of Lebanon also. So they know that. But in some way, they're now kind of unable to actually fight it. They're unable, they're not enough people to join them because they have become a minority, especially the Christians in Lebanon. So they don't really have any power, and everyone is kind of trying to cope it to their sides, and no one is actually, making connections to be able to kick out Hezbollah from Lebanon,
But
and
certainly
that's
they've
something that's.
but certainly they've connected the dots between Hezbollah, Hamas, and Iran, is what I'm hearing you say.
Oh yeah, for sure. They
Yeah.
know that also Hamas is being funded by Iran, and they have seen what happened when Israel decided to go and make sure that Hamas will never ever be able to do anything like that, or anyone else would never be able to repeat October 7th, because Hamas's people went on TV broadcasts abroad and said that they're going to repeat October 7th again and again and again.
And
This
you
is
know what?
something
And
that a
when
lot of
people
people
say
in the
these
world,
things, you got to take these people for their word.
oh
And I
yeah,
think
for
that's
sure.
what the so-called international community, I say in air quotes, really doesn't understand. So you've been doing an awful lot of digital outreach to the Arab-speaking world. In particular, you just alluded to it, vis-a-vis the Lebanese community. Share with our listeners exactly what you've been sharing and also the response that you've been getting.
So many of my content at the beginning of the war were in Arabic, mainly in Lebanese Arabic, because this is the Arabic that I speak. And in some way, I was targeting also the people of Lebanon, because Lebanon is now involved in all what's going on since October 7th because of Hezbollah. Because Hezbollah is dragging Lebanon inside this war that has nothing to do with Lebanon. And and it's kind of history repeats itself. Terrorist organizations have always involved Lebanon in wars against Israel that Lebanon has nothing to do with or has any involvement to it. And that's kind of something that I try to kind of remind the Lebanese people. So when I go out, when I speak, I kind of remind them, hey, remember what happened to us. Remember these dates. Remember what they did to us also. Don't forget that what happened in south of Lebanon was the same thing that happened in south of Lebanon. And it's kind of something that I'm trying to connect a wider connection to it, but also to remind the Syrians and also to speak for the Jordanians and for the Egyptians when I'm making videos that are more factual about what's going on and what happened. And that's kind of something that is super crucial because there is not a lot of information in Arabic. So since the second or third day of the war, we kind of relaunched the group that I created at DiploAct back in 2017. That this is the group of Israeli minorities, both Druze, Christians, Muslims, and Bedouins. Who some of them served in the military, some of them did national service, some of them didn't do either, but they do feel part of the Israeli society. And I took more than 40 delegations abroad in order to share our whole stories from Israelis minorities and to kind of support our country. And they immediately, in the second day, joined back with us and relaunched our group. And we started kind of, widening our spectrum of reach, where everyone would do videos on variety of subjects that are currently happening here in Israel with a lot of information in Arabic and just spread the word out there.
And those in the other countries in the Middle East, they can access that just because it's from Israel. It's not blocked or anything.
Oh yeah, it's on social media. So on
Yeah, yeah,
Instagram, Facebook,
right.
Twitter,
Share
everywhere.
what the handle is.
Yeah, everyone is like by himself. So I share it on my personal um um
Got it. So
like Twitter.
you don't have one. Well, you really should
Exactly.
do that, Jonathan. You should
Because
collect all this and then put it under one umbrella.
I believe that it needs to come from a personal point of view.
Right, but what I'm saying
And
is that I'm wondering if there's a way we can have this conversation offline. And clearly, you're the
yeah.
social media expert and not me. But I'm just wondering if there's like a funnel, if you will, that people can see from all of these content creators, just to bundle it all together. But that's sort of is a separate conversation. So, what are you hearing? What's the response that you're hearing from the Arab world?
Well, the responses are mixed. The one who are kind of against it, they will publish a lot of comments, like in a wider spectrum of like hate, a lot of curses. So, for example, my sister that doesn't exist has received a lot of blessings throughout since October 7th. And this is like an understatement of what's happening over there. I've been getting so many like homophobic slurs also because I also speak about that. This is something that we didn't, touch
Yeah.
throughout this whole part of it. This is also part of me, and I speak about it freely and openly. Because also Israel is being now accused of pinkwashing, apparently, that if we are advanced in gay rights, it's not good because we're pinkwashing. And if we're lacking of gay rights, it's not good because we're, a homophobic country, apparently. And that's something, kind of these people that were supposed to be the peak of the prime of the advanced of human rights organizations that ignored the LGBTQ plus community throughout the years in Gaza or in the West Bank under the Palestinian Authority or under Hamas. Because the Palestinian Authority has persecuted the LGBTQ plus community. Also, Hamas has persecuted the LGBTQ plus community, and there's enormous of examples for it. And
And
only the Israeli
Jonathan,
organization.
I do want to just talk about that for a sec. Can you give an example or two? Again, we have a very varied audience that might not be so familiar, or they might have heard headlines, but just really briefly, just one or two examples of the persecution of the LGBTQ community in I was going to say Hamasistan, which was Gaza, and also in the West Bank.
Yeah, there was a story a few years ago that Hamas have suspected one of their commanders. This is, although I'm like, this is a terrorist that going, but this shows you just a little bit of their kind of state of mind. Um, the Hamas suspected that one of their commanders is gay because they kind of caught him in an act with another man, so they executed him. It was published all across of the media. Also in 2019, the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank has issued arrest warrants against the LGBTQ plus community and LGBTQ plus organizations that are helping the Palestinian queer community. That happened in 2019, and in 2022, there was another case in the West Bank where a gay man fled his family from the West Bank to Israel. He got shelter in Israel. He was able to flee because he was gay. They were persecuting him, and they were able to lure him back to the West Bank. And what they did is that they decapitated him. It was also published all over
The family did,
the
didn't they?
news. The family did it, but nothing happened to the family because it's still under honor killing.
Yeah.
And that's something that for them is
And
it's
again,
okay
the
to
the
happen.
the so-called, again with air quotes, international community does absolutely zero. And
Yeah.
the international LGBTQ community also does absolutely zero. So,
Oh
but
yeah,
they're
they're
going to
just
accuse Israel of pinkwashing, which is absolutely, absolutely absurd. So you're hearing mixed messages coming out of the Arab-speaking world. Um, I am sure you're also hearing a lot of "we support you, but we just can't say it publicly." Because
yeah.
frankly, I have friends across the Arab world, and that's what I'm hearing from them also. And one friend in particular, I don't even want to say which country he's in, sent me a note after October 7th to say that he's fed up with fundamentalism and he wants to move to Europe. And I'm sure you're hearing those stories and those sentiments as well. Now, you also spoke in the US and Canada, and I want you also to share the messages that you were sharing and then what was the response that you heard, because I'm guessing that you also heard a deluge of both support as well as um, criticism and attacks.
One of the things that I wanted also to show is that to show the Jewish community abroad that we're also here for you. We're here to support you. We are here to give you more information. We're here to gonna wider your knowledge about what's going on in Israel because we are here right now. We're living it, and flying there, although it went against all of our our kind of feelings because we it's like although it's a war zone, but we don't feel that we're able to actually leave. It's kind of it's something that you can't explain. It's like we feel like we're running away, but we're not. Like we're going to fight a different front that is super important also. Um, but it was also I've heard so many stories, so many of too many Jewish friends or too many Israeli supporters that even on the day of October 7th, they didn't have 1 second of silence because their friends didn't ask them how are they doing. They didn't ask them if their family in Israel are okay. They didn't ask them what's happening. Do you need any assistance? Do you need any help? Hey, I feel for you. This is really bad. What happened? without the but afterwards. They didn't have that. They just received a really cold shoulder at least, and some of them even received some major, retaliation from people that till that moment were really best friends. And that's something that is super important also to kind of bring the Jewish community together and all of Israel's supporters together and give them more information and also to kind of let them have a few seconds to mourn what happened because a lot of them didn't have that chance. A lot of them didn't take it because since they won, they immediately started fighting. And in my opinion, it's super important to be on the ground at this moment because this is face to face where Israelis throughout the years we have been through dehumanization. A lot of anti-Israeli people, and I'm not saying pro-Palestinian, I'm saying anti-Israelis, don't see us as humans. And this is where kind of we enter, where we need to kind of show them who we are, show them the stories, and kind of share with them our own experience. And this is, in my opinion, will be the way to kind of persuade them. They don't have to be pro-Israelis. They don't have to be, enthusiasm for Zionism or Israelis, but they need to be on the humanitarian side. And this is it.
And it's also just a point of sharing the truth. That's really,
Yeah.
I think, a key element. And I say that because when I look at your social media handle and I see the stories that you're sharing with the world about what it's like to be a member of the LGBTQ community, or you debunk this whole myth that Israel is an apartheid state, right? You do all of this important messaging on your social media handles, again, to share the truth about what it's really like to live in Israel. Because, again, the narrative that's been painted by the Israel haters and the Jew haters out there is spread like wildfire. And so you're
Yeah.
really trying to combat it. And so for that, we say kol hakavod. We just say congratulations to you, Jonathan. And I guess as we wind down this conversation, again, I would absolutely love to have you back because we've really only scratched the surface in the time that we have in this conversation. But just real briefly, what can the average person that's out there do, that's listening right now, do in support of the state and the people of Israel during this really, really dark and very difficult time?
So in my opinion, the first and like the most easiest thing to do is just to share on social media a lot of information that you receive. For example, you've seen a great post about something, share it to your friends. Because at the end of the day, this is how we get to people one by one by one. It's like you're getting to your friend, and your friend at the end of the day, they will get to their friend. So this is kind of something that, goes along. And this is something that it's super easy to do and super important because there's so many, as you mentioned, Steven, so many misinformation out there that not only misinformation, but some blatant lies that are told about Israel, what Israel is doing. And this is something that we need to refute. And this is something that's super important to kind of get the word out there.
Right. And
And also to
again,
share a lot of stories from Israeli minorities. This is
right. And
something
that's and
important.
that's
People don't know.
and that's why we wanted to have you on the show. And we want everybody to go to all of Jonathan's handles and repost everything that Jonathan and his friends are posting about the reality of really what's going on in Israel. Because I think, as they say, knowledge is power,
Yeah.
and we need to
We
gain that power
share
through
we
the knowledge. Yeah.
we share each other's posts on our stories and even on Twitter. So you can, when you follow us, you can find us all in 1 second.
All right. And on that note, we're going to leave it right there. Jonathan, it is always such a treat and a pleasure. I'm really proud to call you a friend at this point. And I just
Yeah.
want to personally thank you for joining us here on IsraelCast, and thank you for everything that you're doing. And we know that you're going to continue doing. So once again, thanks so much. We look forward to having a round two with you before too long, in peace and in security and in good health for everybody.
Amen for that, Stephen. Thank you very much. And thank you for JNF.
All right. And we'll have info about Jonathan on the show notes page of this episode on our website, jnf.org/IsraelCast. We do release new episodes of the show every other Wednesday, so do mark your calendars. And just so you never miss an episode, subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. It's so easy. Simply search for IsraelCast. And don't forget to rate and review us, because that helps with our rankings, which in turn make it easier for more people around the world to find us and hear from truly remarkable people like Jonathan. Or you can always enjoy the show by visiting us at our website. Once again, after all these years, hope you got it. It's jnf.org/IsraelCast. Now it takes a homo shop to put IsraelCast together. For that, we thank Vivian Grossman, Dara Shapiro, JD Krebs, and Ellie Cadrin. Our editors are Jay Rothman and James Casada from Miratone Studios right here in the very heart of New York City. And the music that you hear at the top until the program is titled My Eden. It's by the very talented Rafi Malkiel from his album Water on the Tzaddik label. IsraelCast is powered by Jewish National Fund USA, your voice in Israel. For more info about JNF USA, visit jnf.org. And if you'd like to write to us with story ideas or just to say hello, Jonathan would love to hear from you, and so would yours truly. So do email us at israelcast@jnf.org. Meantime, I'm Steven Shalowitz, thanking you for tuning in and looking forward to having you join us on future episodes of IsraelCast.